Welcome to the Retention Edge podcast. This week, I'm sitting down with Phill Agnew, the founder and host of Nudge, the UK's #1 marketing podcast, where he applies behavioral science and consumer psychology to help marketers better persuade and retain customers. Hi, Phill. Welcome to the show. I'd love to start to hear a little bit about yourself, your background, and the Nudge podcast and newsletter.
Yeah, I'm a marketer by trade. I'm actually one of the marketers who studied marketing in university, which is quite rare. I think it's a good thing if you get into marketing to not study it in university, come in with a bit of external skill, make some of the best marketers, I think. But I actually studied it in university. So I've been doing it for a long time. I'm on record in saying that university degree wasn't the best use of 50,000 great British pounds for me, because I started my career in marketing really expecting to be quite proficient in what I was doing. I just spent 4 years studying about the subject. A doctor who spent their university degree studying medicine is quite good at medicine by the time they get into it. Not perfect, but good. And yet when I started in marketing, I was woeful. I was really quite useless. All the things I was being asked to do, things like create an email that people will open, write a one-pager for a client that will convert them, write a blog post that will attract people to our site. These tactical things, I realized I had no guidance or idea about how I should achieve them. I was being asked to persuade people, to change people's behaviors, and yet the things I'd learned about when I was studying marketing were far more high level, strategical. I knew all about the 4Ps and SWOT analysis, but very little about persuasion. And it wasn't until a bit later on in my marketing career, maybe a couple of years after that, that I discovered the world of behavioral science and consumer psychology. This idea that, well, not an idea, this discipline where psychologists have spent the last really 100 years of human history, if not longer, but 100 years sort of diligently studying how humans make decisions. And they have built a very reliable number of different insights, which if we apply them to the people we're trying to persuade or convince, can be more effective. And I learned about this. I started applying it in my job, got really hooked on it, found that it was really successful. Then in 2019 thought, maybe I would like to listen to a podcast about this. Noticed there really wasn't one in the space and started Nudge. And it turns out hundreds of thousands of other people love this stuff as well because they've listened to Nudge. And today Nudge is the UK's #1 marketing podcast, which is fantastic because behavioral science is a niche of marketing, a niche within marketing. And today it's #1 marketing podcast, and it's what I spend all my time doing, and it's the best job imaginable, really.
Amazing. So what I really like about your content is that it seems to really put the focus on those things that effectively don't change, right? It's human psychology. It's really at the core of marketing, and especially today where it's so hard not to feel overwhelmed just by the wave of change that AI is bringing. Overwhelmed, and also feel this kind of constant FOMO about, the new model, the new tool, the new bot and whatnot. And kind of bringing it back to really what's at the core of marketing, really understanding people, right? And communicating with people. And that seems like, in a way, refreshing, also to some extent a bit easier to deal with, right? Than this really almost unstoppable wave of change that seems to be speeding up, right? Almost exponentially. I'm curious about your take on that, on kind of AI in marketing, and whether, your focus truly is a bit of a way out from the feelings that I was expressing.
Yeah, I mean, I've only been in marketing for a decade, and I think I've heard about the death of marketing or the new age of consumers 3 times within that decade already. It's been the case before, not with AI, with big data, which was what it was at the start of my career, and then personalization, online ads, and now it's AI. And it is scary for a marketer to hear. If anything, scare and fear sells. There's a reason why your LinkedIn feeds or Twitter feeds or Blue Sky feeds are full with people saying that AI will revolutionize your job. It's because that type of content, we can't resist but looking at it. And yet, what a psychologist would say is that the human brain takes millennia to evolve. It hasn't changed within the last 2,000 or 20,000 years. It still acts and reacts in predictable ways that psychologists have sort of nailed down. So, to give a very basic example, we have a bias, a heuristic, a shortcut within our brain, which drives us towards things that lots of other people are doing. And this makes evolutionary sense. So, as cavemen and women, if we saw a bunch of other cavemen and women running out of a cave, screaming, we wouldn't go in that cave. We have evolved to follow the actions of others. Don't go in the cave that everyone's running away from, because there's probably something dangerous in there. And instead do the things that other people are doing, because there's a safety in numbers. And we've evolved to have learned this. And this has been the case for, as I said, millennia. And it is still the case today. It is why a study cited in Richard Shotton's book, The Choice Factory, in 2018, he went into pubs in East London. He asked the barman, "What is your best-selling beer?" The barman at the time said it was London Pride. I don't know if you tried that while you were in London, Pietro. It's not the best, is it? Not that I'm amazed this pub had London Pride as their best. It's like, for the Canadians and Americans listening, it's basically a warm ale. Not particularly nice. Anyway, it was the best-selling beer. And Shotton ran an experiment. And with all of the studies I talk about today, they are randomized controlled trials. It's where you have a variant and a control. So you can compare the difference, which is vital, because that allows you to see if the variant you've made, the change you've made, has had any effect. So on some weeks, they would put a sign up saying, "This is our best-selling beer." Showcase the popularity, showcase the social proof. And then on other weeks, they would remove that sign. Obviously, the beer stays the same. The product is the same. And yet when they have a sign which says this is the best-selling beer, sales go up by 2.5 times for London Pride, which no one even likes. Or at least people liked enough to buy it enough, but I don't like it. Anyway, what was happening, what was interesting, is that they measured the sales for other beers and other products. They weren't really decreasing all that much. What instead was happening is people were ordering their drink of choice. Maybe a tourist was ordering their drink of choice, and then they would say, "Oh, maybe we should try this London Pride as well. Seems to be quite popular." So this is an evolutionary trait which has stood the test of time. Businesses use this all the time. McDonald's famously, when they were growing, would write the specific number of burgers they have sold on their sign. They went all the way up to 1 billion. We have sold 1 billion burgers. The popularity of so many products is because they showcase the fact that lots of other people are using the products. You could make a really decent claim that Aperol Spritz as a drink is solely successful because lots of other people can see you drinking that drink, because it is visually distinct. And because it is visually distinct, it implies this idea that, oh, that's very popular, I should drink it as well. The same was true for Apple when they released the iPod with the wired headphones. They were visually distinct from others, and it imbued that sense of popularity. And this is a long-winded way of saying this is not new. You will have known about this human trait if you were a caveman, if you were a hunter-gatherer. It's something that has been with us for a long time, and yet it still works today. And I think as a marketer, you really have a choice. You can learn about the technologies that affect your job this week, or you can spend your time learning about the psychology that will affect your job in 50 years. One is probably slightly more future-proof than the other. That's not to discredit either. I think there are opportunities with either, but people who enjoy my content do seem to enjoy it for the fact that there is longevity in it. It will still be relevant in 100 years.
Absolutely. So almost to say AI is just the tool of the day. We had tools evolve and get better and faster and simplifying our job for many, many years. And I think this applies also to coding in our context. It's always been getting easier in a way and cheaper to build. And it's now gotten a little bit better and easier and faster to market, right? To write copy, create images and all of that. But still, especially if you want to find an edge, really what's the source and what's the best source, right? It's kind of digging into the psychology that's underlying, that's behind everything effectively, and the response of the work that you create, or is it just trying to catch up with what's changing effectively at almost an unbearable speed at the moment?
I mean, to the point you've just made there, I think there's an argument to say that human psychology becomes even more important in the world of AI. Take, for instance, the example, there's a bias called the von Restorff effect, or the distinctiveness bias. This is found by a researcher called Hedwig von Restorff in the 1930s. She gave participants in this seminal study combinations of different letters to remember. So X, W, Y, D, V, B, different combinations. quite hard to remember them if you've got 50 to remember, all these different combinations. But within those combinations of letters, she would ask them to remember one combination of numbers, of digits, 278. Turns out the digits are 30 times more memorable than the letters. That is not because digits are just more memorable. She flipped the experiment. Suddenly there was loads of digits to remember and just one combination of letters. Then the letters become 30 times more memorable. The finding is if you are distinct within your comparison set, you are more likely to be remembered. Schotten, I mentioned him already, this 2018 book, Choice Factory, he updated that study in his book. He gave people brands to remember from one category. So manufacturing brands, car manufacturing brands, so Ford, Bentley's, Mercedes-Benz, and then one fast food brand, McDonald's or Subway, Taco Bell. The one fast food brand was 4 times more memorable than the others because it was different from its comparison set. Let's bring this back to AI. AI, if you use AI for your work, if you use it for your coding, if you use it to create things, because it is based on a huge large language learning model and it also wants to save energy and time, it will give you something which is fairly homogeneous, which is fairly standard, fairly applicable. And it does that because that allows it to satisfy the request in an easy way. If you push it, it will try and be unique, but if you don't, it will be fairly homogeneous. And in a world of homogeneous, monotonous, similar-looking AI content, any human creating content that stands out will be far more likely to be remembered. So there's an argument there to say that in a world of AI, well, human psychology becomes even more important because you need to stand out from the sea of sameness that is social media posts from any brand at the moment that all look identical because they're all using AI. And I think it's even more important to apply the principles of psychology.
Absolutely. Creating that distinction that you were saying before, even the white AirPods or these kind of examples, and what you just said about AI just makes me think about all those LinkedIn posts with exactly the same hooks. I think I've seen a few screenshots going around with people, Claude has just killed X. How many variations of that can we see really? So definitely the bar is higher, right, for clearing that sea of sameness, right, that AI is creating. Where I'm curious from your experience and from your conversations that you've had, I know you had Cialdini in your show. What have you kind of extrapolated to be applicable almost as a very practical set of guiding principles perhaps, or ideas that one could apply, for example, in advertising, of course, trying to create that distinction, for example, you were talking about, or just simply try and create a winning ad. It's just becoming increasingly harder because the tools, the platforms are becoming a bit smarter, and the volume of ads that need to be created just to give, to feed the algorithm and find them with those winning ads is just, going up and up. And it's more and more challenging to run ads profitably today. I'm just curious if you were to kind of restrict the focus to, for example, advertising, and let's say advertising on Meta as a concrete example. Have you seen anything that could be taken directly from the ideas that you explored and used?
Yeah, I think it's worth. You've used the word ad there as a bit of a general term to talk about advertising, but there is, I think, a difference between an advertising campaign that a brand will believe in and put out, like a major advertising campaign, like let's say Guinness's campaign, "Good things come to those who wait." Guinness, the beer brand. This is a major campaign which has strategy behind it, which goes out in their paid ads, but then, of course, also on TV ads, on billboards, on their website, in their product design, all these different things. That's a major campaign. There is a very difference between a direct-to-consumer goods company that is trying to get as many clicks on their website as possible and will try 100 different variations of an ad on Facebook to try and get one that clicks. Now, my personal point of view is that if you optimize, Seth Godin famously said, if you do enough A/B tests, everything starts to become pornography. You're basically just selling. If you do enough A/B tests, you get to absolute slop. You're basically just reaching the very lowest point of human dignity. And I think there is a point to say that if your goal is just let's optimize our Facebook ads until we get the very highest number of clicks possible, you're not going to end up with a campaign that you'd be proud to share your grandma, for example. There's these famous email campaigns going around at the moment, which are fake campaigns, which look like internal emails sent from a founder to somebody who's working at the organization saying, shall we drop our latest product update tomorrow? Yeah, we want to put the coupon coders early access. Okay, we'll do this tomorrow. And then they, by accident, send it to their whole email list. And these things, I think, work in the short term, but they totally destroy trust in the long term. It is very similar to very rigorous studies which are done on short-term sales coupons. And the finding with short-term sales coupons is that short-term sales coupon giving 10% off your product in the short term will give you a boost, but in the long term pushes people away from your brands. And I think these sort of random, strange strategies which are just designed to get you to click do the same. That is to say, human psychology, behavioral science doesn't differentiate between the two. It likes both. In the Guinness example I gave earlier, good things come to those who wait, that's leveraging a very well-known bias, which is the idea of input bias or neighbor illusion. The idea that if something takes time, if it takes effort, we value it more highly. We are more likely to enjoy a pint of Guinness because we know that it takes exactly 150.5 seconds to pour, and we have a heuristic, which means we like that. At the same time, there's a very famous study with KFC Australia where they did Facebook ads, and I think they created 6 different variants after having 200 different variants that the team came up with, and then they handpicked their favorite 6. And they came up with all these creative slogans. You know, we're loved from Perth to Brisbane. Oh, so I should say KFC Australia was selling chips for $1. That was their sale. They came up with all these famous slogans to try and sell chips for $1. The Colonel's never been so generous. We're loved from Perth to Brisbane. All these different things. The slogan that got the most sales was just pure scarcity. Chips for $1, limited to 4 per customer. Behavioral science doesn't differentiate. If you want to hack Facebook algorithms to get more clicks, you can do so using behavioral science. If you want to create true campaigns that truly resonate, you can use behavioral science as well. I think there's a wider point, which is that if you're just gaming for paid ads, you might end up with a strategy that it doesn't give you the longevity you need.
Yeah. So like if you were to look into behavioral science and just apply all the tactics and just try them all, you just probably end up with some sort of slop and nothing like a properly designed campaign, right? And there's the strength, right, in obviously doing all the thinking and the coordinated action of a campaign across multiple channels and mediums and all that, right?
Yeah, definitely. Because consumers aren't idiots. Anything Byron Sharp writes will tell you that these mental associations we build up with brands take a lot of time. So you build this mental association, it takes a lot of time. And also, interestingly, there's some fantastic work by Danny Zane, this brilliant researcher who's done studies that prove that customers, when they see well thought out campaigns, will value that campaign higher because it's been well thought through. Consumers know when a marketer has taken time to create a campaign which is worthwhile, and they value it more highly. An example of this is, if Danny Zane ran these studies where they would create reasons to do a sale. So, for example, you could, let's say you're selling dog wash products, you could, and I think this was in their study, it was a dog wash company, you could just say, oh, it's International Pet Day, we're going to give you 50% off. That will give you a boost in sales. However, if you have something which is a bit more meaningful and linked to the brand, for example, if you're celebrating the birthday of the founder's dog, for instance, who also happens to be the company mascot, and you're saying, we really want to celebrate this lovely dog's birthday today, we're giving you 50% off. People will value that more because there's more thought and creativity that goes into it. So going beyond the obvious tactics that everybody is using will allow you to get, your customers will appreciate that effort, and they will note it, and they'll change their behavior because of it.
Very interesting. We run effectively a service business, right? We help you build a mobile app starting from a website. And I think I saw something from you around this principle applied to service businesses, right? So something around showing the effort. showing the work, sometimes even showing the cost. Maybe I'm mentioning different things, right? But am I right? There's something there?
Yeah, so this originally is a really interesting 2003 study, a research called Schindler, I believe. And in their study, they got a bunch of participants in a room and asked them to watch presentations, different participants for different groups. The presentations were very dull. There was one presentation on optical switches, another on electronic ink. The presentations for all of the participants every time were the same. However, in one room, the participants were told that the electronic ink presentation took 8 hours to prepare, and the other presentation, the optical switch presentation, took just half an hour to prepare. In a different room, people who saw the same presentation were told the exact opposite. The optical switch presentation took longer to prepare, the electronic ink one took less time to prepare. They then ask both groups afterwards, which of these presentations do you prefer? And in every single scenario, people prefer the presentation that they believe took more time to prepare. That is in the lab. There was another study, I think, by Morales in 2005, where he ran the same study, but with real estate agents and with real customers. And this was back in 2005, where there wasn't Rightmove or a website you could go to find houses to buy. You have to go and ask your estate agent, can you find me a list of houses to buy? And the estate agent would always spend about 8 hours looking for all of their houses and pick. This is high value real estate agents. They would pick the houses that were relevant to the customers they were talking to. However, Morales in the study said to them, well, for half of the people you give this list of houses that you think will be relevant to, for half of them, can you lie to them and say it didn't take you 8 hours? Say it just took you half an hour with this new computer that you've used. This was 2005. It's a new piece of software that you've used and you've been able to do it. It wasn't true. They actually did spend time creating it. So one group were told they took 8 hours, another group took half an hour with a computer. They then measured how many of these people obviously valued the houses, how many went through to do a viewing, how many went through to make an offer, how many went through to buy the houses. And on every single metric, it is higher for the list where they believed it took 8 hours for the real estate agent to create the list. Even though the lists were created in the exact same way, just that perception of this took more time made people value it more. And there's all sorts of really interesting real world examples of this. My favorite, there's a brilliant Wall Street Journal article from, I think, 2011. Rory Sutherland shared it in one of his presentations. And it's an article about this really interesting idea that the Starbucks head office put through. They had basically trained their baristas to do something called parallel pouring. It's really impressive. A barista can create 4 lattes at once. They can put 2 espressos on the go. So double espressos, they're pouring into 4 cups. They get a massive jug of milk going. And within 30 seconds, they can prepare 4 big lattes for customers. They can do parallel pouring, double the amount they can create, because usually they can only create 2 at once rather than 4 at once. They implement this. Starbucks head office and all the economists at Starbucks think this is going to be fantastic. Customers will be able to they'll be served far more quickly. They'll be happier. They won't have to wait in line as long. And it just sounds like a good idea. Except as soon as they implemented this, they started getting awful feedback. Customers started to say the quality of the coffee has gone way down. Fewer people returned. Loyalty was dropping. And eventually they realized, well, this might be to do with this parallel pouring thing. They banned customers from parallel pouring. This is what the Wall Street Journal article is about. They banned, baristas from parallel pouring. And all of those complaints suddenly stopped. And the takeaway here is, from a behavioral science point of view, is that if the activity doesn't look like it took enough time and effort to create the coffee, people don't value the coffee as much. If you go for a haircut and you get the exact same haircut as you do every single time, except the barber spends 2 minutes on your hair rather than half an hour, you'll come out of there thinking, nah, this isn't right. This doesn't look good. If you go get a suit tailored and the tailor spends 2 minutes rather than half an hour or an hour asking what you think, this isn't right, even if the suit is the same. We put value on something based on the amount of effort that's gone into it. Companies can value from this. There's a great example of Dyson, the Hoover manufacturer, vacuum manufacturer. When they launched their incredibly successful first vacuum cleaner, James Dyson came out and didn't just say, this is how great this vacuum cleaner is. He specifically said, I made 5,127 prototypes. This is the one that's best. So it's an exact example. The more effort you put into something, the more people value it. It's the case for Starbucks, for Dyson, and for presentations in that original example we spoke about.
That's super interesting, and it reassures me as well. I remember when we started about a decade ago, we were competing against competitors that were claiming we'll build your mobile app in 30 seconds, 2 minutes, etc. And we were going, okay, 7 days, 2 weeks. Right now we say 30 days, which is the actual time it typically takes to go from sign up to live. We might even make it longer at this point, right? I'm almost saying intuitively, I obviously understood that it wasn't really about speed, and if anything, it has the opposite effect, right? And it's very relevant to AI, right? Today, where you might be tempted, right, to deliver an output so quickly just because you can automate certain parts of it, but like, what's going to be the net effect? Are you going to impress anybody, right? Is the person actually going to be more satisfied or less satisfied, as you were telling me?
There's a great study by Ryan Burrell and Mike Norton. It's on something called operational transparency, and it's the exact point you're talking about. They worked with kayak.com, which is a sort of online travel agent. You go there to book your holiday. And they asked them to test two different versions of their homepage after someone had just made a search, but before the results appeared. So this is in 2011. If you do a search for, say, a holiday to Croatia, in 2011, that takes 5 seconds to get results. It's not instant like it might be today. In the control, it was just a normal loading wheel. So just your page goes white and the page loads. In the variant, what instead they showed was everything that was going on in the background. So they said, we're searching through all the flights from British Airways. We're searching through all the flights from United. We're searching through all the flights from Delta. We're now looking at all the hotels within a 25-mile radius of Zagreb. We're now looking at how you can get from Zagreb to Hvar, all these different things. Now that, because there's computer power that goes into powering that, that means the loading took longer. It took longer to get the results in that scenario. It didn't take 5 seconds just with the white page. It took like 7 seconds. And yet, despite it taking more time, because they were showing the work, showing the effort, showing the transparency that was going into it, people valued the results more. They were more likely to book a holiday when they saw the loading process transparently rather than when they saw the white one, even though it took more time and even though the results that they showed were exactly the same in both scenarios. So to your point, I think it doesn't actually matter that much if something takes longer, as long as that length of time is linked to the amount of effort or the quality of time that is spent by the person delivering those goods.
Yeah, right. So too quick, and it might be undervalued just because one would assume low quality, low effort. If it takes long, it's not too bad, as long as you're kind of showing why and you kind of show the effort that went into it. Very cool. I'm curious, in you run effectively a media business, podcast, newsletter. There are challenges, I think, brought by everything, the shifting platforms we're working on, right? Be it email, inboxes, Google, Apple, and AI, of course. Just the crazy amount of content that's out today. I'm curious if you managed to apply your own learnings and the conversations that you had and what you've read to your own business successfully in ways that maybe could be interesting or replicated by others.
Yeah, I mean, I would be remiss not to, wouldn't I? I would almost be a snake oil salesman, I think, if I didn't actually apply this stuff and test it myself. So not only do I apply it, I've tested it as well. So all of the things I'm talking about, I've run tests on. We've been speaking about this idea of if you showcase your effort, people value it more. I did a couple of ads on Reddit to try and test this. So with my end of year show, I do an end of year show which rounds up the best interviews I've had throughout the year and some of the best sort of answers to questions. I created 2 ads. One which simply said, learn the 6 best marketing insights on Nudge from the last year. And a variant which said, I've spent 480 minutes listening to marketing experts this year. Here are the 6 best lessons I've heard. So one where I call out explicitly the amount of time I've spent working on something, and one where I didn't. I compared the results, and not a surprise, because this is based on peer-reviewed evidence that is published in fairly reliable papers. But the one where I showcased my effort, I said, I've spent 480 minutes doing this, got a 15% higher click-through rate than the control. And then, of course, I start to apply this to other areas of my business. So when I'm talking about the podcast, I might talk about the amount of effort I'm spending on something. My hook for getting people to sign up to my newsletter is a truthful hook, but it is one that is inspired by this, where I say I spend 18 hours every week finding the best behavioral insights information to put into my newsletter. That is true. 18 hours is true. I spend that amount of time speaking to people on the podcast, reading, researching, and that eventually allows me to write a really good Friday newsletter. But I wouldn't have thought to call that out unless I had read all these studies and proven that this stuff really works. And to go to the complete extreme in terms of how I apply this, this idea that people prefer things more if they see the effort that goes into it. I was giving a talk in a conference in the south coast of England last year. And I thought, well, how can I put a lot of effort into this talk to make people value my talk more? And I decided, well, maybe a good idea will be I'll hike to the conference. So I decided to walk 61 kilometers from Bristol, where I lived, to where this conference was being held, which was utterly ridiculous. There was absolutely no need for me to do that, except for the fact that I could then talk at the conference about how I've made such an effort to be here, literally. I had pretty awful blisters, I would say, because I did it all in one day as well. And 61 kilometers is quite a long way to walk in one day. Anyway, I get there, I do this talk, and it's quite a fun talk because I talk about the science of the input bias and labor illusion, all the stuff we've been talking about, and then also talk about this ridiculous journey that I've been on. And this is all anecdotal, but I asked the conference host at the end, how did the talk go down? And he said it was the best rated talk of the day. And I don't think that is because I'm the best speaker. I think that's because I'm literally applying this behavioral bias, which has been proven in so many other areas, but I've been applied it directly to a conference talk.
Very cool. You mentioned science. It made me think there's an old debate of art versus science in marketing. There's a modern version of it, perhaps, which is the vibe of marketing trend and what AI allows. AI might also allow maybe a more scientific approach too. I'm curious, what's your take on it?
I think a marketer by default has to be creative. I think you can't be in the role of marketing and just sort of be fueled totally by data. I think even people who are fueled totally by data have to be creative. And I think what behavioral science gives folks who are creative is the guardrails and frameworks with which to then use that creativity. In the same way that painters often find that they're far more creative if they have some certain restraints. So, if you're given a smaller canvas or only one paint to work with, or a band develops a specific style. No band has every single instrument under the sun and then tries to figure out what instrument to play for the next song. They have limitations based on the fact that they can only play guitar or piano or whatever else it might be. And those limitations allow them to create things that are better than if they had an unlimited amount of choices. And I think in marketing, what's scary, and this is what I referred to at the start of my career, is it feels like an endless amount of options available to you. There's almost no end to the number of different things you could use to promote your business. You can say anything, you can do any campaign, you can promote anywhere. It can be quite overwhelming. What I think behavioral science gives you is it gives you some peer-reviewed, reliable areas to test out your creativity. So, for example, you might read that social proof is a really powerful way to promote your brand, saying what's a bestseller, trying to showcase to people that you're popular. And you can think, well, what are some really creative ways we could showcase our popularity? So there's a great example of this, which is Cat's Deli in New York. This is a Subway a sandwich company in New York. How do they showcase their popularity? They didn't say we're the most popular sandwich deli in New York. All they do is, as soon as somebody fills out a loyalty card, gets 10 stamps on their loyalty card, gets a Subway for free, they take that and they pin it to the wall behind them. And now this Cat's Deli has been around for a while. So the wall behind them is covered. Like, it's ridiculous how many there are behind them. Now, what does that say to a new customer coming into the door? It says, oh my God, this place is incredibly popular. Look at the amount of sandwiches they've sold. And that's just from the loyalty cards. And that's fantastic because that's a way to showcase your creativity showcase your social proof without explicitly having to say it. And I think that's where behavioral science, which is, you could argue, quite formulaic, can be matched with a bit of creativity. What a wonderful way of using social proof in a totally different way. We mentioned the Apple with the white iPhone, iPod headphones as an example. That's another one. Aperol Spritz is another one. But Cat's Deli, what a wonderful way to showcase your social proof without doing what every other company does and just say we sell more sandwiches than anybody else.
Fantastic. Well, I think there's a lot that we've gotten today from you. Thank you, Phill. Where can people learn more about you and Nudge and follow and sign up?
Yeah, I'm Nudge. Just search for Nudge wherever you get your podcasts. Nudgepodcast.com is my website. My name is Phill Agnew, Phill with two L's and then Agnew. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn if you've got any questions. And one thing maybe we can do is I've got a reading list. I've referenced a lot of books here today. I think a lot of people then want to go and see what all those books are. So maybe into the show notes of today's episode, we could put that reading list. So if people want to go and read about the authors that I've spoken about, you can do so there.
For sure, we'll include the list. Thank you so much again, Phill.
Thank you. Cheers.